listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. This week, the party are talking about animal companions, pets, familiars, all those crispy critters that accompany us on our adventures. Then we shift our focus to wagons, drones, particularly tricked out vans that players might become attached to and that GMs can use to leverage some drama. And yes, folks, this week we will be talking about that wheelchair. Let's go! Welcome to the party. I'm Savage.
I'm Scarr. Hard-drinking, hard-fighting barbarian king.
And I'm Liam.
And if you're joining us this week, it's probably because you've grown used to our endorsements, our drink-along game that we call a podcast. Who's got a tipple to titillise and tantalise with this week? Oh, that was quite the pop. What was that?
This is Ron Zapaka, Centenario Sistema Solera, 23-year age.
He's speaking in tongues.
It's rum. It's rum. There's a very pretentious way of making it, but it is sipping rum, essentially. It is almost whiskey, but without the burn. And it is pricey stuff, recommended by Sean, fellow party member host.
And what would your verdict be?
If you're saying whiskey is like whiskey without the burn, I assume you're not suggesting that whiskey has burn, because if it is, you're not buying the right whiskey.
Would you recommend it, Scarr?
I would recommend Ron Zapaka if you want some quality rum that you don't mix with Coke. This stuff's
good stuff.
a little bit beyond that.
Liam, are you tippling?
I am tippling. I'm on the black lager again. We're having a craft beer week, so I'm trying Pinnakin Brewing Company, which is a Finnish brewing company. Their black lager, which they've also labelled as an American Schwartz. I don't know what American Schwartz is, but anyway, that's
IPA,
me.
but with like blue and red in it.
I hope it's not. I think it's just a lager. Well, actually, East Coast American small breweries are decent. America gets a bad stick for bad brewing, and yeah, the big brewing companies are terrible, but there's a lot of smaller breweries around the place that are pretty good.
As the spiritual home of Diageo, I don't think we can throw any stones in that corner. For my part, I'm going with another local delicacy from Lochgill Brewing this time. They're situated down in Sligo, and I'm trying their Dark Magic. And here's a mouthful. This is probably as chewy a drink as you'll find. An Imperial Oatmeal Coffee Cream Stout, weighing in at a hefty 11% by volume. So, on your marks, gents, if you haven't cracked them already, let's crack them up and get this party started. Now, this week, I want to give a shout out to a longtime friend of the party and sometimes host, and that would be Donogh, who has a new game out in the last few days, Codex Leviathan. We'll post a link somewhere. You can find it if you head for our Discord. You'll find it topping our new channel, Stuff from Our Friends. So if you've got RPG or gaming, LARPing, or any sort of adjacent project to promote, be it a podcast product, something you're working on in your spare time, we'd love if you drop by and drop in a link. We should
harass him to host us on the Party Plays.
Definitely, yeah. That'd be if we get Donogh to run a game for us. He's a chap I've had the pleasure of sitting across the table from on many occasions. He is a real champion of those oddities that we normally don't sort of look to when we're looking for something to play long term, but make for an interesting sorbet of gaming goodness in the short to medium term.
And he has his own YouTube channel where he has been uploading his own plays. Is
that the Gauntlet?
Yes, he plays using on the Gauntlet online gaming community, and in the before time when the plague was but a theory that a lot of scientists were warning us about, he was a staple con goer who would always have a selection of amazing games to try out at cons, and we can but hope that in the future time, when ours below one again, that we can once again meet up at a con and play some interesting games with them again.
Mad stuff with helicopters.
Why did I not listen to Matt Damon? He was so right. Anyways, so we'll go from one promotional vehicle to another, which is our topic of conversation this week.
Cars look like hot dogs.
Cars look like our cars covered in artificial grass. One of my favourites. We are indeed talking about pets, mounts, and vehicles in gaming. Most likely tabletop gaming, but if anything else occurs to us, we'll be sure to let you know. Anyone for a LARP on a bus? Obviously there's been a topic of conversation going around the D&D sphere this last week or so around a piece of personal transport that we'll get into a little way later on. But first of all, we're going to talk about the much more general idea of having an animal companion or a mount or maybe a dedicated vehicle or some sort of souped up autonomous drone that you use as part of your game. And,
I think they broadly kind of come in two categories. One is where they're basically just equipment, and the other one is that they are a part of you or your class, that there is some kind of feature that comes along with it. Generally, I think they tend to be a bit more balanced when they are part of your class, because there's a lot more mechanics in them, whereas if money is no object, and if you find a pile of money and you can go through the catalogue, your decker can put together whatever the hell they want, then that can get a little OP.
Yeah, there's just sort of a tension, but in RPGs between people who are seeking like mechanical benefits, people who are seeking to solve particular problems, like we need to get 300 miles down the road in 2 days. And there are people who like animals or having their own car and want that and are willing to give up inordinate amounts of character power or character resources to get it. And making a system that will appeal to all three of these goals is difficult at best of times. There's also sort of the issue of why should it be difficult? Can't I just... How hard is it to buy a horse in medieval Europe or 57 wild dogs, if that's what you're...
Yeah. There's not just the... Yeah, there's that, because, like, I'll be honest, like, I don't know very much about horses. So, were I to wander up and try to buy a horse to bring me from A to B, well, one, I wouldn't know how to saddle the thing. Two, I would know possibly how to ride it in a straight line, but if anything came up, I certainly wouldn't be able to do anything about it. I have fallen off horses before when I've been on holidays on a little having fun jaunt. And two, I would not really, unless this horse was in really deplorable bad health, I don't think I would really know how to evaluate this is a healthy looking horse that should be able to carry me, whatever distance.
But in fairness, no better than you might evaluate the effectiveness of a magical sword.
True.
Because we don't really have that skill set to us, or indeed an ordinary sword. Is the hilt on wonky? Is the blade properly tempered? Things I think we can sort of assume that adventurers are practiced enough in the day-to-day of these sort of things to know.
Probably in the same way that I have a driver's license, I drive a car, while I couldn't assess I'm not going to be able to take a look at a car and assess its full mechanical state. I can verify it's got 4 wheels. Okay, there's decent tread on all those wheels. I don't see any large patches of rust. Doesn't look like it's 2 cars that have been welded together, at least very obviously.
What a hot dog.
Okay, it runs, it revs, it starts up okay. I don't hear any kind of clattering. Okay, it looks fairly roadworthy. Maybe I'll bring it to a mechanic if I have some reservations. So I think a medieval person could possibly be expected to kick the tires and not tell if there's overt problems with a horse.
Yeah, that's true, but not to say that every peasant is an expert on animal husbandry. A pig in a poke and other such tales of con men selling animals is well known. But I think
I don't want to speak for everybody in the party here, but I think at the moment yourself and Shane don't drive. Have you ever driven?
Oh, I've been driving since I was 16.
Oh, really? Okay.
I have
for nearly that long.
I've been behind the wheel of a car, I think, twice.
So, would it be fair to say then that you wouldn't really be able to make an assessment on a car that, okay, that looks roadworthy or not? Well, obviously, if there's a wheel hanging off, yeah. Okay.
I might have some idea because my dad was a mechanic and I might have picked some stuff up from him, but no, I don't think I would have particularly good insight into it. So, but this is sort of the kind of thing where, like, when was the last time that, your average D&D group got sold rusty weapons, for example? Like, that's certainly one of those things that could come up, and, if you're being historically accurate, you could have, someone make swords out of tin and sell them on the side of the street. That certainly sounds like a possible plot, but considering that between the time they're sold...
Good way to get killed with a tin sword.
Yeah, the thing is with, by the time the players return to town, they may be 3 levels higher and have, can shoot fire out of their eyes. It suddenly the question of why were we sold terrible swords in town, but the hobgoblins all had perfectly functional ones.
That trader made 45 quick gold and got the hell out of Dodge.
So, Liam, would your position be you kind of prefer not to see, let's say, mounted stuff, or maybe just
what I'm saying is that there generally tends to be an assumption from players that they have the base proficiency to figure this kind of stuff out. And in the same way that if you're playing a modern day RPG, people kind of assume, okay, why do I have to have a drive skill? You just drive from A to B. And particularly say with an American audience outside of the major cities, everybody drives. So there's kind of a base assumption there that people know how to drive. If you go to the major cities, particularly on the east coast of the US, and if you go to most European major cities, people don't have cars. Like, public transport in London is so good and traffic's so crap that you don't drive. You take public transport wherever you want to go. You take the tube. So, like, the assumption, even in a modern day setting, that everybody be able to drive is wrong. And I think in the same way that if you are people might assume in a medieval setting, sure, everybody knows how to ride a horse. Okay, I don't have to ride, but surely I know how to ride a horse. I'm from medieval times. But you could be a medieval city dweller, in which case, why the hell would you know how to ride a horse? Okay.
Now, we are talking about players who do choose to play characters that can avail themselves of these things.
I'm saying it's a complicated. I know. So in my Warfare game, the last one, one of the last few sessions there, all the characters got horses to go from A to B kind of quickly, and I just said, okay, you guys can have your horses. You got the gold. You buy the horses. But if a guy jumps out of the side of the road with a blunderbuss, you're all rolling on some tables to not get seriously injured because your horse is going to throw you, and at best you'll be thrown clear, and at worst you'll be dragged half a mile down the road. And players suddenly get a little defensive about that. And I was like, well, you don't know how to ride a horse.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't have sort of taken proficiencies in things like mounted combat or animal handling. Is that sort of where we're landing there?
That's essentially where I'm going, yeah. That they wouldn't have it because it's not, but it's something that they just bought with gold because they have gold.
So are you saying that players have a bad expectation that they expect a tool where actually they're getting like a complicated animal that maybe they weren't quite ready for?
I think you just have to be wary that people will expect I have this thing, therefore I can fully use its capabilities. I go out and buy a warhorse, therefore it should be able to it'll stand there in combat even though people are using gunpowder weapons near me, and it'll kick out and lash out and bite out at people because it's a trained warhorse. I was like, okay, it's a trained warhorse, but you're not trained how to use it. In the same way that I can drive, but if you give me a race car and say me on a racetrack, I'm probably going to spin off in the first corner.
Yeah, unless, of course, you've taken race car handling or the D&D equivalent animal handling.
Yeah, absolutely,
which you can get some bonuses to fairly easily. So for players who do intend to spend a lot of time mounted or in the company of an animal companion, then presumably a lot of this is moot. They are acknowledged to have the basic requirements in terms of care, feeding, checking of teeth, etc. So that moves us on to you've got a bunch of players who've been followed around by an even bigger bunch of animals in your game.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do with this menagerie?
I mean, there's several inherent problems in having that. Like if you have 5 PCs in your party and they have 5 animal companions, familiars, mounts, all that suddenly goes from being 5 sets of actions in a round to being 10 sets of actions in a round. So inherently, combat's going to take longer. You might have large size categories, in which case, okay, well, we need to get down a dungeon that's filled with 5-foot corridors. Okay, well, the horse is going to have to be squeezing half the time. Teleporting doesn't work because, you teleport only covers the caster and 5 creatures. It all goes out the window.
So it brings complications, but of course those complications also arrive with a lot of advantages. As you say, players avail themselves of extra actions, which allow
what I mean is that suddenly your entire game can become about what is either equipment or is just a part of somebody's character, and suddenly the entire campaign revolves around it. And if you've got a good player and they turn around and say, okay, right, well, I know we're going to the dungeon, it's going to be a bit tight, you know what, I'm going to leave Clip Clop, my horse, up here. He's an intelligent mount. He's got intelligence 7, and he's a tough old sort and has armor on. He's going to be fine up here on his own. I'm not going to leave him staked down. He'll be within a 500 meter radius of the entrance to the dungeon when we get back. That's fine. And I'm going to go down into the dungeon now myself, not mounted. If that player's perfectly okay with that, then it's fine. You don't have a problem. But if they insist on dragging Clip Clop down into that dungeon, the entire game becomes about how do we transport Clip Clop.
Yeah, well, that's certainly where friction might evolve between the horse owner and the horse adjacent.
But then
especially on tight turns.
That's the sort of thing that should have been sort of hashed out at the start of the thing. Is this like someone who has found a horse on the side of the road and took it in on natural liking it, or is it the paladin?
No, it's a paladin. It's their magically bound mount.
Well, yeah, but then the DM should have really taken this into account.
It's the cavalier who has that as a class feature, rather than the magically pip-pop it appears and disappears paladin mount. Again,
I feel like as soon as the player said they are taking the cavalier class, the GM should have realised that this might not be a dungeon-heavy campaign. Or if the DM came first and said this is going to be a dungeon-heavy campaign, the GM should then feel empowered to say, please don't play someone who will be summoning elephants or horses or the like, because it won't work.
Maybe a cavalry dog or something like that.
Yeah.
Something you can mount, Jim Henson style. Okay, so the GM has a responsibility to players who find themselves availing themselves of animal companions and mounts and things. If it is permissible in the game, then the GM really does have to start to think about how these extra pairs of eyes and ears and this extra set of hooves can benefit the game as a whole. I certainly found the last game I was running, D&D campaign I've talked about quite a bit, but I'm going to continue to mine it for examples. We had 2 warlocks and a paladin. The 2 warlocks have availed themselves of familiars, which sort of look a bit like animal companions. We also had a druid, who is essentially his own animal companion. And the paladin, of course, made ample use of the summon steed spell, I believe it was 2nd level, to summon a fairly smart horse, or something that at least looked like a horse. This presents a GM.
I do remember fellow Humbug telling me about he was in an adventuring party where the second most intelligent member of the party after the wizard was the paladin's horse.
Well, see, yeah, the be careful about dump statting your intelligence wisdom. The help might show you up. So what I found was there was two ways to really sort of exercise these things. Give the players a lot more things to look out for. If you've got extra eyes, then you have extra threats to account for. And it allowed me to certainly surround my players with danger without them feeling overwhelmed or without them feeling like they had to take it very softly or cautiously or back out altogether. The extra eyes and ears allowed them to scout, set up watch, cover their backs, send alerts, or keep an eye on troublesome NPCs. And then the mount presented a different set of challenges. And for me, what I quickly realized was that you need big open spaces if you're going to have a mount on the table, because that character, especially Paladin, is encouraged to use the speed that they're afforded, which overcomes the heavy armor restrictions, and really get up in the enemy's back line as soon as possible. The great thing about this was...
basically to hit and get out.
Hit and run tactics, the ability to transport other players quickly, all became really sort of woven into the sort of encounters I was presenting. Now, the advantage here, of course, is that opening up those ranges is something that D&D kind of often has a problem with at the kind of 5-foot grid sort of range. Now, we'd moved to Roll20, which gave us large table space. But D&D often has spell ranges and ranged combat ranges that equal or exceed the movement speed of a paladin on a horse in any given round. So it allowed me to kind of explore with the players problems that we might not necessarily have gotten to otherwise. How to deal with far off opponents, how to deal with being surrounded, or how to circumvent strong front lines, things like that. I think there's an awful lot to be said for the use of paladins or mounts and familiars in a fantasy game.
Okay, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Is it fair game to kill someone's mount, familiar, animal companion?
I think you, much like with the players themselves, you telegraph the danger. The player has to assess the risk because they're controlling that familiar, that companion, and then you let the dice do the work.
I have seen many animal companions die in a game. I've seen several mounts die. I've never, ever seen a familiar die. And do you know why? Actually, no, that's not true. Once, but that was a particular type of familiar which was using wands and offensively using the wands. In general, how does a wizard's familiar work?
It's going to be invisible.
They are a nebulous thing that gives a wizard advantage, and when somebody remembers, I need to make a perception check, then they make a perception check for their familiar, and then the familiar disappears again and is forgotten about.
There's a joke about this in a certain
The whole party gets fireballs. Oh yeah, order the sick, make a good joke about it. But I mean, in general, the party gets fireballed. Okay, did the wizard remember to give the familiar damage and apply improved evasion so that maybe it only took half damage? Probably not. I guarantee it didn't.
Well, I mean, I can only speak from experience. When we were playing on the tabletop, we had miniatures for the familiars, and when we moved to Roll20, it was simplicity itself to drop in tokens that also represented familiars. I believe one of the warlocks familiars got toasted by some sort of AoE at one point, a negative energy effect.
I just mean, people have a habit of remembering the bonuses for it, but then forgetting about it when it's inconvenient.
Yeah,
particularly with familiars, because they probably have a tiny size, whereas a mount or an animal companion, they're generally large. There's no missing them. You can't hide them.
I think this is sort of a callback to the NPC's problem, is that the horse is not literally across the table from you, staring at you, and therefore, if you don't have like miniatures or a little diagram, it can... Actually, that's a good point. Mick, did you find you had to be making more notes of, just to remind yourself how big this group was?
Oh, it was usually in evidence. There's a lot of them. We won't even get on to the spiritual weapons that were summoned. For my money, the advantage...
Well, they don't take up any space, so they're okay.
But they are making attacks, etc. They certainly, although I introduced some sort of character elements later on, the boon for me as a GM was that I suddenly had 3 more personalities to play with that were sort of, they were taking mechanical direction from the players, but I would generally give some flair. One of the Warlock's familiars was a raven, who called by the name of Icky Icky, who would communicate only in sort of sense impressions and the cry of Icky Icky. The other was a kind of sort of Manhattanite classic fire imp style thing, sort of a chain smoking Iago, the parrot style wisecracker. And the paladin's horse Carnage was a somewhat unsettling presence. It would be found chewing entrails every so often, or other sort of slightly bizarre things for a horse to do. So it allowed me to play back to the characters, reflecting their characters through their familiars, and giving these familiars voice gave me another set of NPCs effectively that were very much on the player's side, that they could invariably trust, but I was allowed to use them to communicate plot details, observances that might have escaped the players but not necessarily the characters, things like that. I think there's a lot to be said for them, as if you have the extra time, or you've got the mental space to keep juggling all those balls.
Yeah, but some GMs will not be in that mindset. And that's a question that comes to my mind. Did you have forewarning that this was going to happen? Did you see this coming on the horizon and prep your style to suit it? Or was it sort of just something that naturally developed around like level 3 of the campaign where we've got the subclasses?
Yeah, definitely had to sort of steer into it once it became apparent, to the point where I was able to generate later on like a mounted combat versus mounted combat sort of side fight that ran alongside a fight the rest of the characters are having. It essentially split screen, which was wonderful in Roll20 once you sort of get your thumbs under the belt. The familiars by far and away probably the most problematic, because extra eyes and ears, invisible, but you're allowed at that point to say to yourself, this is a world where people know about familiars, will take precautions, in much the same way as intelligence agencies will have Faraday cages around sensitive rooms. Magic users will shield their innermost sanctums against the prying eyes of invisible familiars. That's just a given. Once the players understand that there are limitations, then in many ways it helps to ground them in the world. They're not unique in the sense that no one's ever tried this or thought of this before. Somebody, not everywhere is locked off to them. The familiars confer an advantage because they are rolled into the package of powers, as Liam was talking about at the start. So they should be useful more or less all of the time, but not always in the ways that players are expecting.
I think it's possibly more a problem with the class, but possibly the most problematic use I've seen of a familiar is in the Pathfinder class Witch, where your familiar is your spellbook. You get your spells by communing with your familiar. You teach new spells to your familiar, and they can get spells from communing with other familiars, and you can grind up scrolls into a paste and feed it to the familiar. But basically, if you ever lose your familiar, you're screwed.
Right out of luck, yeah. Sounds like there's a very close relationship mechanically and thematically there for the witch and their spellbook. So one thing I would note, and it kind of speaks to that, is presumably the witch is very jealous of that book. No one else is allowed to touch it or go near it or really have anything to do with it.
Yeah, you're not going to be using it as a scout, because if you lose it, you're no longer a spellcaster.
In much the same way as it's portrayed in the Dark Materials trilogy, where there are sort of animal spirits that accompany people in a world of magic and technology. What I did notice that for the most part, other players would not interact with somebody's familiar or mount. It was kind of just seen as sort of
well, as you're saying, people know what familiars are. They'll take precautions. If you see a witch there and they're cackling away, then, there's a fox.
Yeah, best be careful. Although it cuts both ways. Any overt action against the fox is going to be seen more or less as an open call to conflict. But you certainly don't want...
I'm assuming you're already trying to kill each other. You're an adventurer. They're adventurers and you're, I don't know,
I do find it interesting, this idea of a character
Ogre Mage.
A character concept that is tied to their familiar or their mount, or if we're broadly the thing, someone who is tied to their car, like the rigger from Shadowrun, who's like got his car or his or her car,
the
or
Pathfinder
drones,
Summoner.
or both.
I have sat at tables where people have spent several minutes describing in intricate detail what their Eidolon looks like. And a summoner basically has this Eidolon. They're like an exemplar of whatever, a giant scorpion or demon or Amazonian lady or whatever. And they spend several minutes describing the Eidolon, and then 1 or 2 sentences about their character, if even.
I take it, Liam, you're not wildly in favour.
Well, I think that the thing there is that Liam is usually playing systems where, you know, the familiars and mounts are difficult to deal with mechanically, but also generally they're so tied to people that it feels like bad sport to aim at the horse, when in actual medieval times people would bring like 5 or 6 rich people would bring 5 or 6 horses to a fight in order to, and if you couldn't afford,
if it's rolling dice, it's fair game.
Yeah, that's the thing.
In terms of being in combat, if it's rolling dice, it's fair game. If it's attacking, if it's using attacks, if it's using wands, if it's carrying somebody who's doing crazy damage because they get the charge in on a horse, it's fair game. I guess what I'm just pointing out all these problems because they're something that you just need to be aware of, so that you don't let it get out of hand.
But as you say, as Mick says, it also has a chance to add to the game. Assuming you don't already have a cadre of NPCs. That's the thing. I guess
you need to watch out as well, though, because are you playing a character or are you playing 2?
That's a good point.
And if you're getting the same amount of face time, that's fine. But if you're expecting that you and Donogh get the same face time, that may not be fair to your other players.
That's a very good point.
There's, I suppose, anyone who would outline the character of a familiar amount to the same level or an excessive detail to their own actual player character is perhaps in the wrong game.
Well, to me, the Summoner Eidolon thing with Pathfinder was just the epitome of it, because people had the most bland, boring summoners who basically did nothing except heal their Eidolon and maybe cast haste. And the Eidolon just did everything and eviscerated everybody.
But I think that case it's possibly that they just wanted to make an Eidolon character and the summoner
They
character
really are playing Eidolons, not summoners, yeah.
Yeah, which is possibly
the tail
fact
wagging the dog.
It's possible that either the GM should have figured out some way to have them just play this weird monster from out of the game, or that they should have realized that the rest of the party wants to play a normal fantasy game and not a weird mutant thing.
A normal fantasy game. An interesting notion.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point too.
On the subject of fair play and picking targets, I did play a nasty trick on my Paladin player, who is, of course, former host Graham, very experienced player. I did at one point stick some tripwires between himself and the front lines of their opponents. And looked for some rolls. Unfortunately, Carnage, his horse, did not manage to stop or spot these things in sufficient time, and it resulted in a very rare dismount. This is a learning experience for both of us, in the sense that it kind of drew a line under the fact that this is not the only mounted combatant in the world. People are used to this sort of thing. Tread carefully. So advantages and disadvantages were explored around mounts in that game in a way that I think we both kind of learned something from it. It's definitely...
It can stretch credulity, though, the 5th time that happens.
I trick I only pulled once, and yeah, it's not...
But if every combat is being sorted out by the Paladin using Spirited Charge and annihilating somebody with a lance, then everything kind of will have to become that. Suddenly everybody has a phalanx of spearmen to guard their front rank, because otherwise there's no combat. Nobody has any fun because the Paladin just turns up and kills one person around.
Well, they're still limited to their own actions, and the table can be littered with dangers. I don't think we ever had a situation where there was nothing to do for anybody else. I won't blow my own trumpet in terms of encounter design. I'm very much a novice in that respect, but I fairly quickly learned the dangers of the single target bag of hit points.
Look, there's things you can do. Difficult terrain, a couple of barrels out, all that kind of stuff will block a charge, and then it mitigates the power somewhat.
So we've talked about these things as companions. Like, there's a huge role-playing component that is perhaps better or worse explored depending on the temperament of your table. We could go then to, as Scarr hinted at, the rigger is the sci-fi near future equivalent.
The rigger, the pilot, the smuggler with their custom YT 1300. These things of the character who's part of their character concept is this vehicle, and that sort of has a similar issue to, is it a mode of transport or is it part of me? But it's a little bit accentuated in like your sci-fi game because
you can't drive the van into the server room.
But also, you can't walk to Alpha Centauri. So, the players need a ship, and if there's only a ship in the quadrant,
I have to admit, as a long-time fan of Shadowrun, I bounced right off the concept of the rigger when I encountered it all the way back in the 90s. I suppose their time has come. Telepresence rigs, drones, and sort of autonomous or semi-autonomous machines are now a real part of our everyday lives, even if it's only a Roomba.
And so the rigger, I think there is still a place for jacking in because, console ports are a thing, and very lazy engineers do not change the default stuff on servers and on switches. So physically jacking into a console port still does an awful lot. But in general, wireless lets the decker do anything,
Yeah, but the rigger needs to invest in multiple things to be part of the milieu of the modern Shadowrun.
I think in Shadowrun, I'd give it a little bit of leeway, and same way with your sci-fi game, I might give it a little bit of leeway because I think there's a built-in assumption there that there's different times when different people will shine. Like with Shadowrun, the face will go up and talk to the Johnson and negotiate the contract, and then you'll do that, and then the decker will do a little bit of hacking, break into some security cameras, scope out the job, and then there'll be a fight with some security guards, and the street Sam will shoot people up while everybody else kind of does a little bit of shooting. I think there's not a balance in any one moment, but there's a balance overall, I think, in terms of what people do.
Yeah.
So I'd give it a bit more slack than a lot of games. And same way with you'd probably say the same about like Star Wars and stuff, and that, okay, your pilot will have more if you're in a fight against some TIE fighters, but maybe they'll have less to do when you're on the ground doing stuff.
Yeah, but remember, the Millennium Falcon had those gun turrets for a reason. I feel like...
everybody has something to do.
The rigger specifically, in my imagination, is that action at a distance, in that they're not necessarily they're not physically present, but they're putting their toys in the front line or very close to it in a support role. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Well, it's a question of is this the person who makes the physical tools to complement the decker's software tools? Are you building at that, or are they the getaway driver? Because they're sort of in a either-or situation a lot of times. Well, it's like expectations will change on a dime.
Out of res, they're making all the tools, they're prepping all the hardware. In res, they have the getaway car and they're piloting a drone around the place to keep an eye out, and the security guard's coming around the corner, duck.
Yeah, eye in the sky, a stealthy taser unit, maybe a telepresent sort of bot that is there to turn two keys, so that when the gas comes out of the vents, the real people are at a safer move, something like that. It's the rigger has a lot of potential there. Now, of course, the great fun to be had with this is the smiley faces on bare metal. The rigger character is almost, I suppose, stereotypically required to invest an awful lot of care and attention into these otherwise lifeless tools.
And then the GM is going to shoot them without a second thought.
Yeah, there is that tension.
If it's rolling dice, it's fair game.
This goes to the root of a lot of what we've been talking about. These are often talked about as familiars, companions, extensions of self, because these are for the player who likes to have a Wilson to talk to, a badly painted football on the beach, that they're able to have their character and then their character's sounding board, or their character's beloved pet, or their character's alter ego. They're in the game making a difference. There's lots of great role-playing opportunities that surround this concept, and I think the rigger isn't immune to that. We only have to watch things like 2001: A Space Odyssey or Moon to get a sense of, or Castaway, to get a sense of how someone can place an awful lot of themselves or an alter ego or another personality into an inanimate object, and that's something I think any GM worth their salt is going to look at and think about how they might play with that, how they might lean on that or use it as a lever.
Well, if the GM is with
any gear pilot worth their salt will name their gear.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But there is also the added wrinkle of, it's one thing to shoot down a rigger's drone or a wizard's familiar who you can resummon in a day. Is it fair game for the party to be escaping down a highway and for one of the security guards chasing them to pull out a bazooka and just happen to roll critical and not only blow up an expensive piece of equipment and badly wound the players, but then remove all chance that they could possibly escape?
That's something as a GM you have to watch. Like, you need to be very careful to stick in. Now, if the players have done something very stupid to put themselves in that situation, then okay, maybe it's fair game. But I think as a GM, you'd be very silly to put in one bazooka that could end your campaign. I mean, at least give several ways to get around it. And, you see a roadblock up ahead, have a roll to make a sharp turn to get off. You probably want to at least give people some agency to get away from that rather than just boom. I happen to roll a crit, you're all dead.
Yeah. Or
not great.
What the similar thing of, is it okay to shoot down the player's spaceship and leave them stranded on the long forgotten moon of Xandor, where the most advanced technology is the rock that hits another rock?
I guess the answer to that is, what do you predict as the outcome? Is it
your players discover metallurgy and become god kings?
Yeah, our players, spend time discovering ways to repair their ship, find lost bits of equipment, scavenge for other sort of replacement parts and make it off the moon.
Or you manage to get the piece the distress beacon together and then a rescue ship comes along, It's going to become the focus of your game. Yeah,
as long as they've got a justification for it and as long as it leads to more play.
It's not like you can't do mean things to the players, otherwise why play? There definitely has to be something at stake. And yes, if Clip Clop, the murder horse, is, destroying bosses left and right with their hooves, then he can take a few arrows to the face as well. But
Absolutely.
The player needs to be prepared for not only the mechanical impact of shooting out all the player's tires, potentially the emotional impact of no, we'll never make that money back. I put so much love and attention to all my custom parts were in that car, and now my character isn't viable.
I'll answer with a couple of examples.
Look, easy come, easy go. Or a rust monster can eat your +5 magic weapon.
Specifically, addressing vehicles specifically, I'll answer with an example. Not only did one of my warlocks have, obviously, the aforementioned familiar, they had also invested a great deal of character energy, background, and at a certain point in the campaign, money, in their own custom wagon in which the party went adventuring. And this became a great tool for setting up adventures, a great source of anxiety any time it was put in danger. And sometimes it became a logistics problem itself. How do we get a double-decker, 25-foot long wagon up a sheer wall of ice that is 60 feet high.
Tensor's floating disc.
If you can get it onto a Tensor's floating disc, you're doing well. I hope you've got a few of those around. It was a great source of stability and comfort for the players, and also at times it was a literal albatross around their neck. This player had invested something in it. Now, for my money, it had a certain amount of plot armor. That it was never a case that this thing was going to disappear over a cliff, never to be seen again.
People might loot it, but not burn it down.
The conundrum of how to stop it from falling over that cliff as it teetered on its axles is something that I'm sure Michael Caine fans can appreciate. At one point, it was impounded by the hated enemy, a faction that we were definitely going to run into again and again. And,
the taxman.
And it being out of the frame for a while left the characters with a very different set of problems. How do we cover ground without our faithful wagon? And that in and of itself lent a certain texture to proceedings for a couple of episodes or sessions before they were reunited and could then take full advantage of that bit of kit again. Honestly, all of the things we've talked about tonight, I feel like any GM who can't see the potential is probably passing up some very memorable moments that will really tie characters to their equipment and companions. There's huge. I mean, there's obviously pitfalls and things to overcome and logistics and things like that to sort of square away. But assuming you get all of that stuff sorted out, and really a lot of that can be hand waving or more gold out of your pocket, buddy. Then you have the potential to, like, what's one of the defining characteristics of B.A. Baracus? You know, one of the most memorable members of the A-Team.
He doesn't
won't
like
get on
getting
planes.
on planes.
So there's a character quirk tied to a vehicle, and he's got a big, beautiful van.
He's got a sweet
he loves
van.
like almost nothing else. And Murdoch's definitely not allowed to drive it. There's huge Michael Knight Rider, Drizzt and his companion Panthers.
Don't forget Thunder from Thunder in Paradise. Hulk Hogan's show.
What was that?
It was a boat. It was a nice boat, really.
Thunder! Thunder in Paradise!
Okay.
Hulk Hogan first.
As with all of our Type 30 episodes in the current regime, we're running a little long. I did allude to something that I want to touch on very briefly. Some of the impetus to this episode comes off of the back of the current blip on the D&D radar, which is the combat wheelchair. There is a huge series of episodes to be done about inclusiveness and representation. I'm currently having my nostril hairs burned off by an Imperial creamy something oatmeal stout, so this is probably not the time to do it, but I saw that stuff and I saw the reactions to it and I thought, well, lots of player characters get these additional or adjacent sort of bits of equipment or companions that are easily folded into play, and I think there's something very instructive about seeing the combat wheelchair being iterated upon as we speak. I don't think mechanically it's there.
Yeah, more power to you. I think it needs a bit of work because there is some definite things you look at and go,
sure.
Plus 2 AC. Ooh. If it's a system where
tap out on AC fairly quickly.
A plus 2 wasn't so big, I think I'd be like, yeah, cool, whatever. But the fact that it seems to be aimed for 5th ed,
and the specifics,
plus 2 AC is huge. Hey, you want to rock around in a wheelchair if that helps you identify and place yourself more in a game. Yeah, more power to you. Fine.
It made me think about what I put into games and what I don't put into games, and too often we sort of overlook that which we don't have any direct experience with, and that was certainly something that popped into my mind. Perhaps there's an episode that we'll kind of figure all of this out. I'd say we'll have to see the official D&D writers do a little bit more to not just pay lip service to this sort of thing, but actually write it in both in world and mechanically. That there's I think it opens up some very interesting game space.
I think as well, in certain settings of D&D, I can see it working very well, because if you look at, say, Eberron.
The new Eberron book has got quite a few selection of protheses, from the one that you just take for flavor to the one that has like all kinds of inbuilt gizmos and such in it. So yeah, there's all kinds of space there for people who've got different physical needs and stuff, and still let them play. But yeah, I think that's one of the things for me and this whole topic is that very often we tend to look at these things as just a way to get around or a way to get an extra action. But for a lot of people, they're personal things. There are things that, that mean a lot to them. Maybe if someone does name, their animal companion after their real life pet, I think that just shows that, that means something a bit more to them there. So don't look at it as just another emotional hook. For the same reason, if someone's character is married, you shouldn't just paint crosshairs on their back just for the hell of it.
Oh boy. So in order, I'm going to shoot your horse, your car, and your wife.
Not on their back, on their spouse's back, Shane.
We're not monsters. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Just not their dog. We all saw John Wick.
Vehicle puns. We've explored some interesting ideas. I think the combat wheelchair now joins a long legacy of modes of transport, some of which can be quite tied to a character and their identity. But we'll leave it there for now. I've been SavageMick. Scarr.
I've been a Barbarian King and slightly drunk. But not as drunk as these two idiots.
Hey, I'm fine. Anyway.
That's right, Liam. You're perfectly sober. I can only see two of you.
Yeah. You can't see any of me. No webcams on. This is voice chat.
With that, go in peace. Go with a companion at your side or a beloved piece of equipment, a robotic horse named Mary Jane, or a sniper rifle that bears the name of your dead mother. Some weird stuff like that. But whatever companion you choose to take into your games, we've been the Adventuring Party. And for now, this party's over. Thank you for listening to the Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.